Another feature of Spanish life in the early 19th century was its weak and corrupt government under Charles IV. Many Spaniards cheered when he was overthrown by his son Ferdinand in March 1808, but their joy was short-lived. Shortly afterwards, Napoleon sent French troops to occupy Madrid. By May the 13th, his brother Joseph sat on the throne of Spain, and a grim war of resistance had begun. It was a conflict of unusual bloodshed and cruelty, and the greatest Spanish artist of the time sought to capture its horror. In 1810, he began to create another major series of prints, The Disasters of War. Like the Caprichos series, these were etchings accompanied by an enigmatic title. In this case, There Is No Remedy. This 1811 print could equally well be a comment on many horrors of the 20th century. The war against the French also inspired Goya's work in paint. Here we see a depiction of the very first act of Spanish resistance on May 2nd, 1808. A contingent of French troops is attacked by the citizens of Madrid, and the result is a swirling mass of violence. Brutality is shown in equal measure from both the French and Spanish factions. The French commander's response to the events of May 2nd was brutal. He ordered the execution of dozens of Spanish citizens. Some of them had been involved in the insurrection. Others were innocent members of the public who just happened to be there. This was the subject matter for one of the greatest works of art ever created, the 3rd of May, 1808. Goya's masterpiece.
The 3rd of May is a wonderfully dramatic painting. It was painted not at the time of the uprising in 1808. It was painted in 1814, several years later, at a time when Goya was trying to ingratiate himself with the Spaniards and show that he was a true patriot after all. And yet its appearance is so compelling that people often believe it must have been painted on the spot. It has that kind of eyewitness look to it, even though probably Goya was nowhere near the event at the time. They're not dying like heroes, sort of singing the national song or anything like that. They're throwing their hands up in despair. They feel hopeless. They feel completely bereft. And that sort of deep humanity, I think, is the thing that comes out of the picture.
Goya's creation of a kind of depiction of street conflict, of a kind of warfare which takes place in an urban setting, I think did have some influence over the large-scale rhetorical creations, for example, of Delacroix, Liberty Leading the People. Obviously, the formal influence is very clear when one looks at Manet's Execution of Maximilian, for example. That technique of bringing the executioner and the executed so close together to almost sort of cut out that distance which allows one to feel that all of this is nice and controlled. That, I think, Manet took very much directly from Goya.
This amazing work was Goya's greatest response to the conflict that engulfed his country. But it was not the only